The sweet potato casserole on my fork still steamed when my father's words cut across the table like a blade. "You're nothing but a leech. You can't stay here anymore." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. The string lights twinkled against the tinsel, their glow powered by the electric bill in my name. From the living room came the faint tick-tock of the antique clock, the one I'd paid to have repaired just last month. The smell of cinnamon cloves and roasted turkey still hung in the air, yet every bite turned to ash in my mouth. Before we dive into true revenge stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. My mother Denise dropped her eyes to her plate, nudging untouched green beans around with her fork. She didn't look at me. Tessa, my 17-year-old sister, clutched her glass of water like it might shield her from the tension, wide eyes flicking between us. My father, Frank Mitchell, sat at the head of the table, shoulders squared like a judge delivering a verdict. He waited for tears, for begging, for me to surrender like I always had. But I didn't cry. I chewed slowly, calmly, even as the casserole tasted like cardboard. "Did you hear me?" Frank barked, his voice rising. "You're out by the weekend." My hands trembled, not with fear, but with something heavier, something shifting inside me. A line had been crossed. A door inside me had closed. I set down my fork, folded my napkin, and met his glare. "I understand." 3 simple words, flat and steady, echoing louder than a scream. His jaw clenched, thrown off by my composure. He wanted drama, but what he got instead was a mirror of the emptiness he'd carved into me. Mom cleared her throat, voice quick and hushed. "Blair, you'll still pay the health insurance this month, right? I have that appointment Tuesday." Her words hit harder than Frank's outburst. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "You don't have to listen to him." Just, "Don't forget to cover the bill." I heard the truth with painful clarity. I wasn't a daughter. I was a bank account. "Yes," I said, voice flat. "I'll take care of it before I go." I stood, collected my plate and Tessa's empty glass. As I carried them into the kitchen, Tessa brushed my wrist with her fingers, a tiny gesture, the only show of support I'd felt in months. I clung to that touch like a lifeline. At the sink, I scraped the casserole into the disposal, rinsed the dishes. Outside the kitchen window, my old car sat in the driveway, the one thing in my life fully mine, untied to this house or these people. At least I had that to drive away in. Behind me, Frank's chair screeched across the floor. He leaned against the doorway, blocking the warm glow of the Christmas tree. "You think staying calm makes you stronger?" he sneered. "I'm the man of this house." I dried my hands slowly, then looked him square in the eye. "Right. And I'm the one paying for this house." His nostrils flared. "Don't think paying a couple of bills makes you the owner here." A couple of bills. My laugh almost slipped out, bitter and sharp. The electricity, water, internet, groceries, my mother's doctor visits, all covered by me. I remembered overhearing him 2 weeks ago venting to Mr. Simmons next door through the open kitchen window. "It's not right. A man losing control of his own household. She acts like she owns the place now. At the time, I wasn't sure he meant me." Tonight erased all doubt. Frank, Mom whispered from the table, placing her hand on his arm. "Not tonight. It's Christmas. Christmas. A holiday built on peace and forgiveness. In this house, that meant silencing myself and writing another check. Not anymore. I understand, I repeated this time to myself as much as to him. I understood that staying meant erasing myself one bill at a time. Leaving was the only way forward. I gathered my phone keys and notebook from the table. As I passed Frank, he muttered under his breath, "You'll regret this." I paused just long enough to answer, "No, Dad. I'll regret it if I stay." Tessa's eyes clung to me across the table, wide and searching. I gave her a small nod, the only promise I could make. I wouldn't keep playing their game. I wouldn't be the walking wallet anymore. I slipped into my coat, my father's glare following me like a shadow. Mom's voice floated after me, quiet but sharp. "At least leave the spare key just in case." She already knew. I always left the spare. That blind trust had been my mistake. Tonight I finally saw it for what it was, a door I never locked against them. I stepped out onto the porch. The cold December air bit at my skin sharper than any knife. Behind me, the lights of the Christmas tree glowed warm and golden, a cruel contrast to the words that had just cut me free. "Merry Christmas," I said quietly as I closed the door. Not sarcastic, not trembling, just final. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked to the car. My keys jingled in my hand, steady and solid. The weekend deadline Frank had given me no longer mattered, because tonight I had already chosen. I was leaving with my receipts, with my boundaries, and with my name no longer chained to their bills. And behind me, the antique clock ticked on, steady as ever, like even time itself was on my side. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. The night didn't bring sleep. I lay awake in my room with the faint glow of the Christmas lights leaking under my door. My father's words still echoing. "You're nothing but a leech." The words circled my head like a mosquito whining, biting. A leech. Parasite. Worthless. Yet when I rolled over, my gaze fell on the stack of envelopes piled neatly on my desk. Electric, water, internet, car insurance. Every envelope bore the same name, mine. Parasite Number Provider. 3 months ago, when Mom lost her accounting job, bills stacked up faster than the junk mail stuffed in our mailbox. Frank's part-time wages at the hardware store barely kept the mortgage alive. Without hesitation, I covered everything else. At first, I told myself it was temporary, just until Mom finds work again, just until Dad picks up more hours. But weeks slid into months, and I realized I'd become the backbone of this house without anyone admitting it. I got promoted at work in November. I'd shared the news just 20 minutes before my father called me a leech. My salary wasn't huge, but enough to upgrade my hours to full-time and give me some breathing room if I'd kept the money for myself. Instead, it evaporated into groceries, overdue utility notices, and a replacement refrigerator when the old one gave out in July. I opened my notebook, the one where I'd been tracking every expense. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. July, $1, $200. Refrigerator, August, $480. Utilities and internet upgrade for Tessa's schoolwork. September, $950. Car insurance, medical copays. October, $1, $300. Groceries, electricity, water. Mom's appointments. November, $1, $600. Mortgage supplement, utilities. Thanksgiving dinner. 5 months, almost $6,000. All gone. I traced the numbers with my fingertip, my hand shaking. My savings account had been nearly $9,000 in the summer. Now it sat at less than 1/10 of that. I was 25 years old, still living under my parents' roof, not because I couldn't afford rent, but because I'd been covering theirs. And still, I was a leech. I flipped to the back of the notebook where I'd stapled receipts, Target, Home Depot, the local pharmacy. Each one proof that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't exaggerating. They called me dramatic. They called me ungrateful. But the ink on those slips of paper didn't lie. Down the hall, the floor creaked. I froze, listening. Mom's voice drifted faintly from the kitchen. "She'll pay it, Frank. Don't worry." I squeezed my pen until the plastic cracked. My worth in this house had been boiled down to a number printed on a check. The next morning, I brewed coffee in the pot I'd bought last year and sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. Frank had left early for his shift. Tessa padded in, hair-tousled hoodie zipped to her chin. She hesitated before sitting across from me. "You're really leaving, aren't you?" she asked softly. I stirred my coffee. He made it clear. Her eyes darted to the stack of envelopes I'd spread out like a grim deck of cards. "Why does he call you a leech if you pay for all this? Because pride is louder than truth." I thought, because control matters more than fairness. "He doesn't like not being in charge anymore," I said aloud. Tessa's mouth twisted. "He tells Mom you act like you own the place, but you kind of do." The honesty stung, not because she was wrong, but because she said it with such innocence, as if ownership were a sin. I reached across the table, resting my hand over hers. "Listen. None of this is your fault. But you need to start paying attention, Tess. Don't let them make you feel guilty for needing help, and don't let them trick you into carrying their weight too soon." Her shoulders slumped. "What if I already have—" I frowned, but she pulled back before I could press further. She mumbled something about homework and disappeared down the hall. I sat there, coffee cooling, staring at the evidence of my slow unraveling. My father could call me anything he wanted, but he couldn't erase the paper trail. The bills, the receipts, the account statements, all of it told the real story. I wasn't draining this family. I was the only reason it hadn't collapsed months ago. A parasite feeds without giving back. But me, I'd been bled dry. That night, I began gathering everything: bank statements, receipts, contracts in one place. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed armor. My father had words, my mother had silence, but I had facts. Cold, undeniable proof. The word Leech still rang in my ears, but each envelope I stacked, each receipt I clipped, carved away its sting. By the time I zipped my binder closed, I had a new name for myself. Not Leech, not parasite, provider, witness, survivor. And if they thought they could kick me out and still feed off me, they hadn't seen me truly stand up yet. I started packing. The way I start most hard things: quietly, one small decision at a time. Shirts folded into neat thirds, jeans rolled tight to save space. The zipper on my suitcase purred softly each time I added another layer of the life I'd financed for everyone but myself. It was after midnight when the house finally settled. The Christmas lights cast a dim, wavery glow down the hall. From my parents' room came the low murmur of the TV and my mother's occasional cough. I moved like a ghost underwear into the duffel toiletries, into a plastic pouch laptop charger, coiled and rubber-banded. When I slid open my desk drawer to grab my file folder, the one with the receipts and account numbers, my hand brushed against something that didn't belong. I keep my papers ruthless and clean. Anything out of place is a siren. Beneath my stack of insurance statements there was an envelope. Not mine. No return address, just the bank's logo and Frank Mitchell printed across the front. My stomach tightened. We'd switched to paperless months ago after Mom lost her job. I hadn't seen a paper statement since August. I told myself it was probably old mail. Harmless. I told myself I would slide it back and keep packing. I didn't. I lifted the flap and slid out the statement. The numbers popped first, bold-centered, quiet, in the way a loaded gun is quiet. Balance, $6,842.17. I flipped to the earlier pages and found deposits I didn't recognize. Cash deposits, regular ones. July, August, September, each month a little higher. The account had been opened in June. There were more envelopes. I fished them out, stacked them on my bed, and worked back in time like I was rewinding a movie I'd missed the beginning of. July, $4, 012. August, $5 and 190 hours. September, $5, $936. October, $6, $314. The same pattern. I traced the numbers with my thumbnail hard enough to leave a white groove. While I'd been draining my savings to cover groceries and utilities, my father had been fattening a secret account like a hog before slaughter. I might have doubted what I was seeing if the next piece hadn't fallen out and landed face up in my lap, a glossy trifold brochure from a boat dealer on the west side. A blue pen had carved notes into the margins. Down payment, $500 circled twice. Scheduled delivery after Thanksgiving underlined. A star next to discretionary accessories depth finder. Rod holders a collapsible canopy. The brochure slid from my fingers and skittered across the comforter. I grabbed the nightstand before the room could tilt. Someone knocked. A sharp, soft tap. Yeah. My voice came out thinner than I liked. The door cracked open. Tessa slid in oversized hoodie, swallowing her shoulders. She closed the door behind her and stood with her hand still on the knob, like she might have to run back out. "You're really leaving," she whispered, eyes moving over the suitcase, the piles, the paper mess. I held up the brochure. "Did you know about this?" She flinched. "About the boat." Her gaze dropped. "Yeah. How long?" "A couple weeks." She swallowed. "He was talking to Uncle Rick in the garage. Said he'd put the deposit down already. Said he'd wait till she covers November. Then he said you'd be out." Heat rose up my neck, pulsing behind my ears. I tried to reel it in. I'd rehearsed composure all night. I didn't want to lose it here with the only person in this house who had ever touched my wrist like it still mattered. Tessa picked at the edge of her sleeve. "He told me not to say anything," she whispered. "He said if I warned you I could kiss my car insurance goodbye. And he'd start charging me rent. You don't even have a job," I said, then heard the uselessness of it. She gave a quick, broken laugh. That's kind of the point. I steadied my breath and slid the statements into my purse. There's more, isn't there? She hesitated. Mom's appointments. Yeah, they're not checkups. I heard her on the phone. She said her lips were too swollen for a straw. Tessa mimed an exaggerated pout and rolled her eyes. It's filler, Blair. It shouldn't have surprised me. It still did. I pictured the pharmacy receipts, the co-pays, the way my mother had sighed when I'd handed over my card at the counter. Bless you, honey. I don't know what we'd do without you. I knew now. I crouched and pulled the shoebox from under my bed, the one I'd labeled with a Sharpie house. Inside, dates amounts, confirmation numbers, serial numbers for the refrigerator, and Tessa's laptop printed PDFs of the utility accounts, showing my name in fat black sans serif. I set them beside the bank statements and the boat brochure. The pile looked like a shrine built to a god I no longer worshipped. Tessa nudged the brochure with her knuckle. It's the ugly kind of boat, too. Despite everything I snorted, there is an attractive kind. Her mouth twitched. The moment flickered warm, then cooled. What are you going to do? I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, fingers laced. The answer forked on one side. Confrontation. March into their room, dump the evidence on the duvet, recite the numbers like scripture, tell the truth until something shattered. On the other side, silence. Pack. Leave. Call the bank in the morning. Call the utilities. Move my money. Let the facts speak later to people who wore nameplates and took notes and didn't call me a leech at dinner. Part of me wants to show him this, I said, tapping the boat brochure. Make him look me in the eye and admit what he's doing. And the other part thinks there's nothing to admit he'd ever believe. I looked at my sister. Gaslighting only needs one person to cooperate. I'm done cooperating, she bit her lip. If you go, what happens to me? It was the real question, the one I couldn't file under receipts. I reached out and took her cold fingers in mine. You keep your head down for now. You tell me if he threatens you. You apply for every scholarship. And you don't sign anything he puts in front of you without letting me read it first. She nodded a quick bob, like she was memorizing instructions for an exam. I slid the statements into a clear sleeve and tucked them behind the first tab of my binder evidence. Then I added the brochure, the handwritten notes, the scrap of paper I found on my desk with November due dates, and a line in block letters after bills paid. I didn't remember writing it. The handwriting wasn't mine. The clock on my wall flipped from 1:17 to 1:18 a.m. The air felt dense like the room had been sealed. Okay, I said, standing. Here's the plan. I leave by Sunday. I move my accounts in the morning. I freeze access to anything they know about. I take what's mine and I document what isn't. If he tries to stop me, I have proof. And the boat, Tessa asked. The boat can wait, I said. There's a leak to fix first. She didn't smile this time, but her eyes steadied. She squeezed my hand before slipping back into the hall. When the door clicked shut, the quiet folded over me again. I looked down at the neat stacks I'd made, jeans, sweaters, evidence the life I was taking and the life I was leaving. I wanted to do something dramatic. Slam a door, smash a plate, wake the house and make it see me. Instead, I slid my binder into my backpack and zipped it closed. Confrontation would give them a scene to point at and call hysteria. Silence would give me distance and leverage. I turned off the lamp. In the darkness, I could still see the number in my head, $5,500 down payment. I lay back, hands folded on my stomach, and listened to the house breathe. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow, I would stop funding their version of me. And if my father wanted a boat, he could learn what it felt like to float without my paycheck under him. The next morning, the house felt like a stranger. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, my suitcase half packed upstairs, my binder of evidence zipped into my backpack. The Christmas tree in the corner blinked cheerfully oblivious. The smell of yesterday's turkey still clung to the air, stale now heavy. I poured a cup of coffee and sat at the table staring at the same surface where 12 hours ago I'd been demoted from daughter to leech. A soft shuffle behind me made me glance up. Tessa stood in the doorway, hair pulled into a messy bun, hoodie sleeves swallowed over her hands. She looked younger than 17 in that moment, like the little sister who used to beg me to braid her hair before school. "You didn't sleep either," she said. "Not much." I nudged the chair beside me. "Sit." She did, tucking her knees up under the hoodie. For a while we just sipped our coffee in silence. Then she blurted, "I should have told you sooner." My stomach tightened. "Told me what?" She looked at her lap. "About Dad, about the boat, about Mom." I set my mug down carefully. "Start with the boat." Tessa's voice wavered. "He said once November's bills were covered, he'd be free. That's how he put it. Free. He told Mom they could finally get the storage room back when you were gone. And he told me if I warned you, I'd regret it." The words landed like bricks in my chest. "Regret it how?" Her eyes glossed. "He said he'd make me start paying my car insurance. Or rent. He said he'd find a way to make me miserable if I crossed him." Anger burned low and steady, the kind that didn't flare but scorched everything in its path. My father had weaponized fear against my little sister, just like he'd weaponized guilt against me. I took a slow breath. "Okay. What about Mom?" Tessa shifted uncomfortably. "The medical appointments you've been paying for, they're not medical, at least not the way she made it sound." I frowned. "Explain." "She came home last week with her lips all swollen. Said she couldn't drink through a straw for 2 days. I asked what happened, and she said it was from a procedure." She laughed and said, "Don't worry, insurance covered it." The image hit me hard, my mother rolling her eyes, dismissing my concern while I'd been eating ramen 3 nights a week to keep the lights on. Fillers, cosmetic procedures, paid for on my dime. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles whitened. So while I've been draining my savings to keep us afloat, Dad's stashing money for a boat, and Mom's sneaking cosmetic treatments under my insurance. Tessa's eyes darted to mine. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared." Her honesty cracked something open in me. I wanted to be angry at her, to demand why she hadn't come forward sooner, but the fear in her face was too real. She was still a kid trapped in the same toxic cycle I'd been drowning in for years. "You should have told me," I said, softly. "But I get it." Tears welled in her eyes. "Blair, what do I do if they turn on me next?" I reached across the table and took her cold hands in mine. "You survive until you're out. You don't sign anything Dad puts in front of you. You don't let him guilt you into paying for anything. You focus on school and scholarships. I'll help you. When the time comes, I'll make sure you don't get stuck like I did." Her grip tightened. "Promise, promise." For the first time in days, I saw something flicker in her expression. Hope. Fragile, but alive. After she went upstairs, I spread my binder open on the table. Receipts for the refrigerator. Tessa's laptop. The living room carpet. Utility bills with my name in bold. Credit card statement is neatly highlighted. And now the new additions. Dad's hidden bank statements, the boat brochure, the handwritten note that read, "After bills paid." The pile looked less like paperwork and more like ammunition. I thought about last night, the fork in the road I'd seen. Confrontation or silence. I wasn't ready to storm into their bedroom and throw the truth in their faces, not yet. That would just spark denial, shouting maybe worse. But silence didn't mean surrender. Silence could mean strategy. I slid each paper into a plastic sleeve labeled the tab Evidence, Financial Manipulation. My hands moved with a precision that surprised me. Fear had burned off, leaving behind something sharper resolve. They called me a leech. They treated me like an ATM. They thought they could bleed me dry and then shove me out the door. They were wrong. I zipped the binder shut, slipped it into my backpack, and straightened. By the weekend, I wouldn't just be gone. I'd be free. And when they came looking for me, or worse, for my money, they'd find more than a quiet daughter with tear-streaked cheeks. They'd find proof. I didn't pack another sweater. I packed leverage. By noon, I had cleared the end of the dining table, set down my laptop, and opened the blue binder I'd labeled last night Evidence. Beside it, I placed a fresh spiral notebook and wrote the title across the first page in block letters, Operation Freedom, Call Log, Date, Time, Number, Name, Summary, Confirmation Code. If anyone tried to rewrite the story later, I'd have a transcript written in ink. Step 1 was simple: move my money. I drove to the credit union across town, the one my parents didn't know about, and opened a new checking and savings account with an amount that looked embarrassingly small until I remembered what it represented a clean start. The teller slid a temporary debit card toward me and smiled like she'd handed me a key. In a way, she had. Back in the car, I turned on the heater, balanced the notebook on my knee, and called my old bank. I need to change my mailing address and remove all trusted devices, I said, voice steady. I asked for two-factor authentication on everything and a verbal passcode only I would know. When the rep offered to text the code to the number on file, I gave him mine. Not the family plan. Not anymore. 12:41 p.m. Bank A. Alex. Enabled 2FA removed trusted devices. Set verbal PIN Juniper. Ticket number A94712. I transferred every dollar out of the account my parents knew and set a hard alert on the remainder to prevent overdrafts and accidental bill payments. Then I opened my email and changed every password I owned, email cloud backups, streaming services, even the account where I ordered dog food for Baxter sometimes. New passwords unique and long with a fresh authenticator app. I removed all backup emails and phone numbers except mine. 1:08 p.m. Email. Changed. PW enabled app-based 2FA removed recovery email. On the drive home, I stopped at the post office and rented a P.O. box. Mom loved opening my mail by mistake. That mistake would end today. I dropped in a form to forward all mail from the house to the box, then stood in the weak winter sun and felt something unclench in my chest. Step 2 cut the cords. I started with the internet. I'm the account holder I told the rep, reading the account number from my binder. I'm terminating service at this address effective immediately. There was a pause. Then the woman on the other end asked if I'd like to transfer service to a new address. Not today, I said. And please note, the account cannot be reinstated or transferred by anyone without my verbal PIN Juniper. 2:02 p.m. Internet. Kayla. Terminated service added PIN requirement. Conf #N77340. Electric and water were next. I scheduled shutoffs for Friday at 5 p.m. The end of Frank's deadline so they'd have enough time to move accounts to their names like adults. I refused to play savior and then be called a leech for the encore. 2 to 19 p.m. Electric. Mateo. End service. Fry 5:00 p.m. Final bill to P.O. Box. Conf EL 11983. 2:27 p.m. Water. S. Patel. End service. Fry 5:00 p.m. Removed autopay. Conf number WT 55210. I called car insurance next and removed Denise as an authorized contact. Then I called my health insurer and put a note on my file, no dependent claims authorized. Require photo ID for all changes. I asked for a fraud alert on the account and a list of recent claims. When the rep read back last week's visit coded as cosmetic, I let the silence sit until it grew uncomfortable on their end. I'll be disputing that, I said, and took the claim number down like a license plate. 2:54 p.m. Health. Tara. Fraud alert ID required claim. RC 084321 flagged. I texted Tessa between calls. Me, if Dad hands you any forms, don't sign. Send me pics first. Tessa. He keeps stomping around, keeps saying she thinks she can cut us off. Me, I'm not cutting you off. I'm cutting myself free. You okay, Tessa? I will be. Finish your plan. Step 3. Lock the doors they can't see. I emailed HR and updated my address to the P.O. box, then removed my parents' address from my W-2 and benefits. I opted out of paper statements entirely. I enabled alerts for every transaction over $5 and created a separate folder in my inbox called Receipts, Legal. Every confirmation email went there, every screenshot. I even snapped photos of my call log and saved them to a cloud drive they didn't know existed. When I stood to stretch, Baxter Max's giant retriever thudded his head onto my knee and snorted. I scratched his ears and felt the day settle into something like momentum. Drew came in from a late shift, saw the sprawl of papers and whistled low. "You building a rocket or a moat?" they asked. "Both," I said. One gets me out. The other keeps them from following. They set a mug of tea by my hand and sat. What's left? Phone plan. I grimaced. It's in my name. We spent an hour in a three-way with the carrier. I paid off the device's split lines and moved my number to a new individual plan with a fresh account PIN. I set a note. No changes by anyone but me, in person, with photo ID. 4:11 p.m. Mobile. Andre, separated. Plan, new account. Ending 9043, PIN set store ID only. Conf, MB 66102. After that, I called the credit bureaus and placed fraud alerts on my files. It took 10 minutes apiece, and I wrote down each confirmation like it was a prayer. 4:42 p.m. Equifax. Fraud alert. #EQ F19320. 4:55 p.m. Experian. Fraud alert. #EX Z771110. 5:07 p.m. TransUnion. Fraud alert. TU A55892. By early evening, the table was a grid of checkmarks. The house felt different, quieter, as if the vents had stopped carrying someone else's demands into my lungs. I closed the binder and looked at the front door. A thought I didn't invite came anyway, spare key. I had always left one under the chipped flower pot, like Mom asked, the same way I always left a copy of my boundaries under the doormat for them to wipe their feet on. I went outside and lifted the pot. The key lay there, dull and familiar. I slipped it into my pocket and replaced it with a note. Boundaries are not abandonment. B. Petty. Maybe. Necessary. Absolutely. Back inside, Max breezed through the door with a toolbox and a grin. "Security cam delivery," he sang. "World's least glamorous Christmas present." We mounted a small camera above the apartment entry, paired it to my phone, and set motion alerts. Drew installed a sturdier strike plate on the door. Baxter supervised sprawling across the rug like a golden rug with opinions. When we finished, I leaned against the wall and let my head thud back. My phone buzzed with a new email: electric service. Finalized. Another mobile plan. Account separation complete. One more bank. Security changes confirmed. Feel any different? Drew asked. I listened for the answer. It wasn't fireworks. It was a dial tone going silent. It was the click of a lock that finally caught. I feel private, I said. My phone lit up again. Mom. I didn't answer. A minute later, a text arrived. Denise, internet is down. Insurance said I'm not active. Call them and fix it. We are family. I added the message to receipts. Legal. And for the first time didn't feel the reflex to fix anything. I washed my mug, dried it, and set it in the rack. One plate, one cup, one life scaled to fit the person who owned it. On the table, the Operation Freedom log lay open to a fresh page. I wrote one more line. 7:19 p.m. Self, rescinded access, reclaimed name, outcome breathing. 3 days after I cut the last cord, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in months, Aunt Phyllis. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Curiosity won. Blair, she said, voice sharp as vinegar. I never thought you'd abandon your parents at Christmas of all times. Do you have any idea what they're telling the family? My grip tightened around the phone. What exactly are they telling you, that you stormed out, left them high and dry? No explanation. Denise is in tears. Frank's beside himself. They said you're going through some kind of breakdown. We're having a family meeting this weekend at my place. Everyone deserves to hear your side if you even have one. There it was, the narrative, the smear campaign. I pictured my father leaning across Aunt Phyllis's kitchen table, lowering his voice for effect. She thinks she runs the house, she snapped. We had no choice, the kind of story that made him the victim and me the villain. Thanks for the invite, I said evenly. But I won't be there. Blair. I ended the call before she could continue. That afternoon the text started. A cousin mom says you broke Denise's heart. Another, we're worried about you. Call Dad. Each ping vibrated through me like a hammer on glass. They weren't really worried. They were primed, trained to believe the loudest voice at the table. I set the phone face down, breathing through the rising anxiety. Then I opened my binder and flipped to the section marked Communications. I slid the texts into a sleeve. Evidence, documentation, receipts. That evening, Drew dropped their keys into the bowl by the door and found me cross-legged on the couch, surrounded by papers. "They're turning the family against me," I said. "They already were," Drew replied gently. "You just couldn't see it before." I rubbed my eyes. "They're saying I abandoned them." "You didn't abandon them. You stopped letting them abandon you." The words stuck. I copied them onto the first page of my notebook, underlined twice. 2 days later, the counterattack escalated. At lunch, my phone lit up with a call from work. It wasn't HR or my boss. It was the receptionist. Blair. "Your dad's here. He says it's urgent." My heart plummeted. "Don't let him in, please." I heard muffled voices. Then the receiver came back. "He's already leaving." Looked pretty upset. I ended the call and closed my eyes. It was classic Frank making a scene in public, planting seeds of doubt with anyone who'd listen. "See how unstable my daughter is. See how she treats her family." I added it to the log, 12:42 p.m. Frank Mitchell. Showed up at work, left when denied entry. Witness receptionist. That night, Tessa called from her room. She whispered so softly I could barely hear Dad's madder than I've ever seen him. He said, "You're ruining his reputation." My chest ached at the tremor in her voice. "Listen to me, Tess. None of this is your fault. If he pressures you, don't argue. Just tell me. I'm documenting everything." She sniffled. "What do I do if he comes after me?" "You call me. Or you call 911. You don't try to fix it yourself." There was silence. Then a tiny, "Okay." When we hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at the glow of the security camera feed on my phone. Frank hadn't shown up at the apartment yet, but I knew he would. The next morning, my inbox pinged with something new, a fraud alert from my bank. 3 password reset attempts from my parents' home IP. I almost laughed. They weren't even subtle. I called the bank immediately. The rep confirmed it. "We've blocked the attempts, Ms. Mitchell. No changes will go through without in-person ID verification. You're safe. Safe." A word I hadn't associated with my family in years. That evening, as I brewed tea in Drew's kitchen, I realized something: they were running out of moves. The bills were no longer mine. The accounts were locked. The relatives could gossip, but I had documentation. Their control was slipping like water through clenched fists. But I also knew Frank. He wouldn't surrender quietly. The pounding on the apartment door came just after midnight. I froze mug in hand, tea sloshing hot across my fingers. "Blair," my father's voice boomed through the wood. "Open this door right now." The sound of fists hammering against the frame rattled the hinges. The dog barked. Drew's eyes met mine, steady but grim. The confrontation I'd been dreading was here. And this time, I wasn't the one caught unprepared. The pounding shook the apartment door so hard the peephole rattled. "Blair," my father bellowed. "Open this door right now." Hot tea splashed across my knuckles. Drew froze mid-step, eyes warning me to stay put. Max's giant retriever barked until the doorframe trembled. My chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Not panic, not this time. Something colder readiness. "Open this door!" Frank roared again, fists slamming the wood. "You think you can just walk out, ruin this family, and cut us off? Turn the power back on. Put the insurance back. You hear me?" Above the door, the tiny security camera blinked blue. Motion alerts fed straight to my phone. Every kick, every shout was being recorded. For once, the proof wouldn't be just my word. A door across the hall creaked open. Mrs. Perkins, in her white robe, peered out with the courage of someone who refused to be intimidated. "Young man," she called, voice shaking but firm. "Stop pounding on that door. You're disturbing everyone." Frank spun, face flushed. "Mind your business, lady. This is my daughter." "It's my hallway," she snapped. "I've already called security." That seemed to rattle him. He stepped back, then kicked the lock hard enough to splinter the frame. I jumped, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. My voice came out calm. "This is Blair Mitchell. My father is attempting to break into my apartment. He's damaging the door. I have video footage. Yes, I'm safe inside. The address is..." I gave the dispatcher the details and hung up. Within minutes, the elevator dinged. A uniformed security guard appeared. "Step away from the door," he ordered. Frank sneered but didn't move. Then came the sirens, the heavy boots. 2 police officers entered the hall, 1 male, 1 female. The woman's nameplate read, "Rodriguez." "Sir, back against the wall, hands where we can see them," she commanded. Frank spread his arms wide, mock innocent. "I'm her father. She's unwell, having some kind of breakdown." "This is a family matter." Rodriguez's gaze flicked from the splintered wood to the security camera. "Property damage is not a family matter." She turned to me. "Ms. Mitchell's safe, to open the door on the chain." I slid the chain across and cracked it 2 inches. Cold air rushed in. "Yes, I have proof, lease receipts, video. He doesn't live here." Frank lunged a half step, but the guard blocked him. Rodriguez's partner moved closer, hand hovering near the cuffs. "Ms. Mitchell," Rodriguez said gently, "would you like to make a statement?" I held up my binder and passed her a sleeve through the gap. "Photos of utility bills in my name account. Alerts a screenshot of my father's boot connecting with the door." She flipped through, quickly, eyebrows lifting. "Do you want to press charges?" she asked. The question hung in the air. Old reflex told me to smooth it over, protect him, let it drop. But the splintered door frame, the barking dog, and Mrs. Perkins's pale face told me otherwise. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. "For the damage and attempted unlawful entry, and I want to file for a restraining order." Frank barked a laugh. "You'd really do this to your own family?" I met his stare through the crack. "You did this. I'm just filing the paperwork." Rodriguez nodded once. "Cuff him." Her partner stepped forward, crisp and efficient. Frank sputtered about boats, sacrifices, and ungrateful children, but the steel clicked around his wrists all the same. Mrs. Perkins recorded everything from her doorway, hands trembling but steady. When they marched him down the hall, he twisted for one last look. "You're destroying us," he spat. "No," I said softly. "I'm refusing to be destroyed by you." Inside, Rodriguez took my full statement at the kitchen table, while Drew brewed new tea. I laid out my binder like a map, bills, deposits. I never made insurance claims. I never authorized tonight's damage in high-definition video. She took notes with practiced care, then slid a card toward me. "Here's your incident number and my contact info. File the restraining order first thing tomorrow. If he returns, call us immediately." "Thank you," I said. The words felt heavier than their size. At the door, she paused to glance at the security camera. "Smart move. That little eye saved you tonight." When the latch clicked behind her, the apartment sank into silence. Drew leaned against me, steady as a wall. Baxter sprawled at my feet, sighing like he'd fought the battle himself. I looked at the cracked jamwood, splintered, but still holding. My hand steadied on the notebook as I wrote the night's final entry. 12:31 a.m. Frank Mitchell. Attempted break-in, door damage, detained. Action pressed charges. Next restraining order. Outcome line held. And for the first time in years, I believed it. 3 days after the police hauled my father out of the building in handcuffs, I thought maybe, just maybe, the storm was breaking. The door frame was repaired. The security camera caught nothing but neighbors walking their dogs. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself exhale without listening for footsteps in the hall. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Tessa. "Tessa, Mom took your laptop and camera from your room. Said they're collateral for what you owe them." Tessa. Heard her on the phone. Parkway Pawn. She got $300 for both. My stomach lurched. The laptop I'd used to finish my degree. The DSLR I'd saved 2 years for. Together worth more than $2,000. Gone for $300 and a shred of spite. I sat, frozen, phone clutched tight, until Drew set a mug of coffee on the table. "What's wrong?" I handed them the phone. Drew read, shook their head slowly. "She pawned your stuff. You have receipts." A grim laugh escaped me. Every serial number, tax folder, binder tab 3. That afternoon, I drove to the precinct with my binder riding shotgun like a passenger. Officer Williams, a tall woman with a calm presence, met me at the counter. "You want to file a theft report?" she asked after I explained. "Yes. These are the receipts." I slid the folder across the desk. "Laptop purchased in 2020. Camera purchased in 2021. Both in my name. Serial numbers documented here. She flipped through, nodding. This is exactly what we need. Pawning someone else's property is a criminal offense. We'll contact the shop and recover the items. Relief rushed through me, tempered by something harder. I'd expected denial excuses, another lecture about family business. Instead, the system clicked into gear on my side this time. That evening, Drew and I ate takeout on the couch, cartons of fried rice balanced on our knees. My phone buzzed with another message. Mom. I almost ignored it, then opened it out of morbid curiosity. Denise, I had to pawn your laptop and camera to cover the electric bill you left us with. Parkway Pawn on 4th Street. You owe me $300 plus interest. I showed Drew. Their jaw dropped. She put the confession in writing. Apparently. I saved the message straight into my receipts. Legal folder. Evidence had become my second language. The next morning, Officer Williams called. We've located your items. The pawn shop confirmed the serial numbers match your receipts. They'll be held as evidence until the case is processed, then returned to you. I sat on the edge of my bed binder in my lap. So she's facing charges? Yes, Williams said. Pawning property without ownership documentation is fraud. It's serious. The words left me dizzy. For months I'd been gaslit, told I was dramatic, unstable, overreacting. Now reality was on paper, stamped and filed in a case number. By the end of the week, the gossip mill shifted. Relatives who had scolded me days earlier now called in hushed tones. We didn't know it was that bad, Blair, my Aunt Sarah whispered. We heard about Frank's arrest, about Denise pawning your things. Honey, I'm sorry. Sorry. I wanted to laugh. Sorry didn't rewind 3 months of savings drained into their bills, didn't unsplinter the doorframe or erase the word Leech from my memory. Still, it was something, an acknowledgement that the truth was leaking out, despite my parents' best efforts to contain it. That night, Drew and I installed the second security camera above the back stairwell. Max wired the feed to my phone. Baxter sprawled across the rug paws, twitching in dream chase. When we finished, Drew leaned against the wall. You realize what this means, right? They're losing control. Every move they make now backfires because you've documented everything. I sank into the couch, exhaustion washing over me. Then why do I still feel like I'm waiting for the next blow? Because you grew up trained to, Drew said simply. It'll take time to believe you don't owe them anymore. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote the day's entry. 10:42 a.m. Denise Mitchell, pawned laptop and camera. Evidence receipts, text confession, pawn ticket confirmed, action theft report filed, Officer Williams recovering items, outcome system siding with me. I closed the notebook, slid it under my pillow, and lay back. The hum of the new camera filled the quiet like a heartbeat. They had called me a leech. They had stolen, lied, manipulated. But tonight the record was clear. The theft wasn't mine. The record finally told the truth. 3 days after I filed the theft report, my phone lit up with Mom's name. I stared at the screen until it almost dimmed, then answered. Some part of me wanted to hear what excuse she'd try this time. Blair Denise's voice trembled, slightly rehearsed. I've been thinking about everything. I want to propose a compromise. I didn't answer. Silence is a language she hates. If you drop that ridiculous theft report, she continued, you can come back home. Your room is exactly the way you left it. We'll let you live here, of course. No more fighting. We'll work it out. The rehearsed tone gave her away. I pictured Dad standing just out of sight, nodding along, feeding her lines. And Blair, she added after a pause, we think we should talk about your state of mind. Frank and I are concerned. People might understand better if we said you were having a breakdown, not what you've been claiming happened. The threat slid between her words, sharp and familiar. Drop the charges or we'll brand you unstable. I let the silence stretch again. In the background, I could hear the TV blaring the same game show that used to fill our living room every evening. Nothing had changed there. Everything had changed here. Finally, I spoke. I have copies of every bill I paid for the last 6 months, bank statements showing transfers to your account, text messages where you asked me to cover cosmetic procedures you pretended were medical necessities. Would you like me to present all of that as evidence? The quiet on the line was heavy. I could almost hear her inhale, Then exhale, her script derailed. "You wouldn't do that to your own mother," she whispered. "You already did it to your daughter," I replied, and ended the call. The next morning I met Officer Williams in the precinct parking lot. She followed my car back to the house, her cruiser's presence sending a message to every neighbor craning from their curtains. My binder rode in my arms thick with receipts and statements. Inside, Mom stood in the doorway, smile stretched thin when she saw the officer. "This isn't necessary," she said quickly. Williams ignored her and followed me down the hall to my room. I packed methodically books, closed the lamp I'd bought with my first paycheck. Each item had a receipt waiting in my binder. When Mom tried to object, Williams held up a hand. "Mrs. Mitchell, your daughter has proof of purchase for everything she's taking. If you believe otherwise, you can contest it in civil court. For now, she's entitled to remove her belongings." Mom's mouth opened, then closed. She retreated down the hall, muttering under her breath. I worked quickly, each box a piece of my life reclaimed. Through the blinds, I saw neighbors pretending to water plants, check mail walk dogs, all watching. Let them. For once, the truth had an audience. When the last box was in my car, I locked the trunk and turned toward the house. Mom lingered in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Family is all you'll ever have." "Then you should have treated me like family," I answered, "not collateral." Her face flickered just for a second, and I knew she'd heard it. As Officer Williams and I walked back to our cars, she tapped the binder under my arm. "You've done everything right. Documentation reports, boundaries. Most people in your position don't have half this preparation." "I had to," I said quietly. "They'd never believe me otherwise." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Believe me. They believe you now." That night at Drew's apartment, we stacked my boxes against the wall. The space looked smaller, cluttered, but it was mine. My phone buzzed with a new text. "Denise, you left us with nothing. We'll never forgive you." I saved the message into my folder, then powered the phone off. Forgiveness wasn't something she could withhold like rent money. It was something I'd already given myself. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote 9:47 a.m., Denise Mitchell, attempted bargain drop theft report for return home, added threat of breakdown narrative, response refused, recovered belongings with police escort, outcome boundaries reinforced. I set down my pen, feeling a strange calm. They had tried guilt threats, even theft. Now they were left with empty rooms and stories that no longer worked. For the first time, I realized I wasn't bargaining anymore. I was free. A year later, the smell of turkey fills my apartment not theirs. The oven rattles a little when I open the door, but the bird inside is golden brown juices sizzling. The countertop is crowded with mismatched bowls, mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce from a can rolls that are slightly too brown on top. Nothing looks like the glossy spreads in magazines, but every dish is mine, chosen, cooked, seasoned the way I like. The apartment hums with voices. Drew is at the table folding napkins into crooked triangles. Max sets down a bottle of cider with a flourish, pretending it's champagne. Tessa, home from her college dorm for the weekend, leans against the counter in a sweater 2 sizes too big, laughter bubbling from her chest as she watches Baxter chase his tail in the living room. "Need me to carve?" Max asks. "Sit," I tell him, sliding the pan onto the stove. "Company is contribution enough." The words slip out before I realize, and I see Tessa glance at me, recognition sparking in her eyes. A year ago, contribution meant keeping receipts, tallying bills, measuring my worth in dollar signs. Tonight, it means presence. It means laughter and mismatched napkins. We carry the dishes to the table, plates, clinking chairs, scraping. I take the seat at the head, not because I want authority, but because it's the only spot where I can see them all at once. Drew raises a glass. "To found family and boundaries worth keeping." "Cheers," Max says. "And to turkey not burned for once." We laugh, clinking glasses. I look at Tessa across the table, her eyes brighter, posture lighter. She talks about classes, about her roommate, who sings in the shower, about a professor who reminds her of Dad, but in a funny, harmless way. She's building a life that isn't chained to guilt. I helped her fill out scholarship forms, navigate housing, choose textbooks. The knowledge I earned through bruises became her stepping stones. Later, while Drew and Max argue over board games, Tessa and I sit shoulder to shoulder at the counter sorting through applications for next semester's scholarships. She chews her pen cap thoughtfully. "You know they still blame you for everything, right?" I figured, I say. "They lost the house last month. Dad told Uncle Rick it was the bank's fault, the economy's fault, anyone but him. Mom repeats it like gospel. But honestly," she shrugs, "it would have happened anyway. Your money just delayed it." I nod, glancing at the small stack of unopened envelopes on my bookshelf. 5 of them, all from my parents, all unread. Boundaries don't mean the thoughts disappear. They just mean I get to decide what crosses the threshold. Tessa nudges me. "Do you ever think about talking to them again?" Sometimes I do. Sometimes I wonder if limited contact could exist without poison seeping back in. But then I remember the splintered door, the stolen laptop, the pawn shop receipt. I remember the word Leech echoing across a Christmas table. I think about it, I admit. But I don't owe them that answer yet. She studies me, then nods like she understands more than she says. When the dishes are washed and the guests are gone, I walk through the apartment slowly turning off lights. The teal accent wall I painted months ago glows soft in the lamplight. The second-hand table is scratched. The plates don't match the carpet. Still sheds fuzz, but it all belongs to me. Every bill in the mail slot has my name on it, and for the first time that doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like ownership. I sit by the window with a mug of tea, watching the city lights blink. A year ago, I drove away from a house that called me a parasite. Tonight, I close the blinds on a home that calls me something else free. I open my notebook one last time and write Thanksgiving. 1 year later. Guests, Drew, Max, Tessa. Food edible, not perfect. Mood safe, joyful. Outcome. A table of my own. I set the pen down and smile. Some families are chosen, some are found, some are built from scratch. Mine sat around my second-hand table tonight, lifting mismatched glasses, laughing loud enough to drown out the ghosts. And for the first time, Thanksgiving feels like Thanksgiven and thanks kept. The stack of envelopes sat on my bookshelf like uninvited guests. 5 of them all in my mother's handwriting, all unopened. The oldest yellowed a little at the edges. The newest had arrived just last week, forwarded to my P.O. box. Each one had my name scrawled across the front in her familiar cursive letters I used to see on birthday cards, grocery lists, permission slips. Now they looked like accusations. For months, I'd left them untouched. Some nights I caught myself staring at them, imagining their contents apologies, mixed with blame guilt, wrapped as love invitations disguised as ultimatums. Other nights I told myself they were just empty, desperate attempts to keep me tethered. Still, they hummed with a kind of power, the power of what if. It was a gray Sunday when I finally pulled the stack down and carried it to the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. Drew had taken Baxter for a walk. Tessa was back at school. Just me, the envelopes, and a decision I'd been circling for a year. I lined them up by date, oldest to newest. My hands hovered, then dropped. I didn't tear any open. Instead, I stared at the postmarks, the smudges of ink where the pen had pressed too hard. I thought about how easily those words could slip under my skin if I let them. The first letter was dated March, 3 months after I left. That was when Aunt Sarah had called whispering apologies. I imagined Mom's words inside, "We miss you. Come home. Forget the past." But I knew the hook hidden in the bait. Pay the bills. Cover the costs. Prove you're still loyal. The second was June. By then they'd lost the house. I pictured the narrative twisting. If you hadn't abandoned us, we'd still have our home. Never mind the boat deposit, the fillers, the secret bank account. In their story, I was always the villain. The later letters, August, October, December. I didn't even bother guessing. I knew the rhythm too well, a cycle of denial, blame, and manipulation. I picked up the newest envelope and held it against the light. A faint outline of paragraphs showed through lines, dense and slanted. My chest tightened. The temptation to open it was sharp, the way picking at a scab is sharp. You know it'll hurt, but curiosity scratches anyway. I set it down. That evening, Drew found me at the table, the letters spread like a hand of cards. "You finally looked at them?" they asked. "Looked. Not opened." Drew poured tea, sat across from me. What's stopping you? What's stopping me is knowing exactly what's inside. I don't need to read it to hear it. I've heard it my whole life. Drew tilted their head. Then why keep them? I didn't answer right away. Maybe because throwing them out felt final, like burning the last bridge, even if it had already collapsed. Maybe because part of me still wanted acknowledgement, even from people who'd never given it freely. They're proof, I said finally. Proof of how far I've come and how far I'm not willing to go back. Drew nodded slowly. Then maybe the unopened part is the proof. That night, I dreamed of the old house. The kitchen clock ticking the dining table heavy with food I'd bought Dad at the head, declaring me a leech. But in the dream, I didn't stay seated. I stood binder in hand, walked out the front door, and never looked back. When I woke, the stack of letters was still on the table, untouched. Sunlight streamed across them like a spotlight, as if daring me to choose. I picked them up, slipped them into a folder labeled unopened, and placed it in the back of my bookshelf. Not trash, not treasure, just record. Later that week, Tessa called. They asked about you again, she said quietly. Said they want to reconcile. I smiled without humor. Did they say why? Same reason as always, she admitted. Money. I closed my eyes, let the disappointment wash through me. Then nothing's changed, no, Tessa said softly. But you have. She was right. That evening, I wrote my notebook entry Sunday. 5 letters received, none opened. Action archived. Outcome. I decide what enters my life. I closed the book, exhaled, and realized something simple. Silence could be an answer, too. When I look back on everything, the slammed doors, the splintered lock, the pawn tickets with my name erased, I realize my journey wasn't about revenge in the way most people imagine it. It wasn't about shouting louder or throwing accusations across the dinner table. My true victory came the moment I learned to step away, to reclaim what was mine, and to build a boundary that no one else could cross. The Bible says, in Proverbs 22:7, the borrower is servant to the lender. For years, I was the lender in my own home, carrying bills, groceries, and medical expenses on my back, while being called a burden. I gave until I was empty, and yet the more I gave, the more they demanded. It wasn't love, it was control. The moment I cut the financial cord, the moment I refused to keep paying for their choices, I stopped being their servant. I became free. There's also a Western proverb that echoes in my mind. Good fences make good neighbors. I used to think love meant having no fences at all, keeping myself endlessly open, even to people who hurt me. But I've learned that real love, even for family, requires boundaries. My fence is not built of bitterness, but of self-respect. And once it went up, peace flowed in. That is the heart of true revenge stories, not vengeance served on a platter, but freedom claimed in silence. My revenge wasn't burning bridges, it was choosing not to walk back across them. It was sitting at my own Thanksgiving table, surrounded by people who chose me because of love, not because of what I could provide. It was realizing that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and reconciliation isn't owed when the other side refuses to change. To those listening, maybe you've carried the same weight, being the one who pays, the one who bends, the one who is told you're never enough, no matter how much you sacrifice. Hear me when I say your worth isn't tied to the bills you pay or the approval you chase. You are allowed to build fences. You are allowed to say no. And sometimes the most faithful thing you can do, the most courageous, is to walk away from what is destroying you. I share this because stories like mine are not just for sympathy. They are reminders. They are warnings. And they are invitations for others to find their own freedom. If you've ever lived through betrayal that wore the mask of family, you already know how sharp that pain cuts. But you also know how powerful it feels to stand on your own breathing air that isn't borrowed, writing a future in your own name. So if this story touched you, I ask one thing. Leave a comment, share where you're watching from, and let us know what part of Blair's journey resonated with you. Hit like, subscribe, and join us for more true revenge stories, because each one carries a piece of truth, a lesson, and a light for someone still trapped in the dark. And remember, revenge doesn't always look like fury. Sometimes it looks like freedom. Sometimes it looks like peace. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply never being called a leech again.